Mr. Newham, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. I mean, this issue around police bribery, we now know that some of those officers have allegedly been trying to sell back confiscated goods to these traders in the Joburg CBD. It's not a new phenomenon. It doesn't make it right.
Definitely not. It is an ongoing challenge that the South African Police Service has been faced with for many years. Of course, corruption in the police didn't start with democracy. It was a problem before then. But I think what is important to recognize here is certainly over the last 2 years or so, we've seen more attention being given to this challenge by the South African Police Service. So it is important to note that these police officers were arrested by their colleagues. We've seen a dedicated anti-corruption capacity, investigation capacity being established over the last couple of years so that each province has its own set of police investigators that only investigate allegations of criminality and corruption against police officers. And we've seen quite a large number of police officials being arrested. In Gauteng alone, for the last 3 years, almost 140 police officers were arrested. And over the last 2 years, we've seen 660 police officers facing disciplinary hearings for alleged involvement in corruption. So it is not as if the police aren't aware of this. What is good is that they're starting to take more action.
Yeah, I mean, there are two sides to that coin, I suppose. On the one hand, it does appear that it's a small part of the policing community that would be involved in issues of bribery and issues like that. But they are being arrested by their own colleagues. It would in some ways be a good story to tell. The police themselves are trying to deal with it.
Yes, indeed. And I think that we do need to see more arrests. I don't think that these small numbers are really an indication of the scale of the problem. We know from various surveys and other research that the police, or trust in the police, because of issues of corruption and brutality, has declined quite substantially over the last few years. The National Victims of Crime has shown a reduction in the proportion of households who approve of the police, with perceptions of corruption driving some of this decline in public approval. So although it might not be most police officers, one police officer who's corrupt will undermine the image of the police in the eyes of many South Africans. So we do need to see, in fact, more resources being given to the integrity management component of the South African Police Service, more resources given to the anti-corruption investigators, because the more police officers that get arrested and charged, the fewer there will be to undermine the image of the South African Police Service.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about more resources being given to these various departments. But let's look at the story from the perspective of the officers themselves. You know, these are people who put their lives on the line every day. We were told those officers who appeared in court, in fact, just this morning, their take-home pay, and that's the remuneration they get for a very dangerous job, is around 8,000 or 9,000 rand a month. What can we do in terms of perhaps remunerating our officers better, training them better?
Well, firstly, the South African Police Service have tried to improve the remuneration of their officers over the years, so that for police officers, they typically get more pay than other public servants on the same grading. But also, there are various other benefits in that to being a police official. It's a job where you can get additional training, you can develop your skill sets, and over time you can, as you go up through the ranks, earn a decent salary. And it never it provides an excuse for corruption, because corruption's a crime.
Yeah.
So you know, if in most police officials who are doing that kind of work don't commit corruption. So there's not an excuse to say they're not getting paid enough and that's why they're corrupt, because there are many thousands of police officials who get the same pay and who are not corrupt. And being corrupt is a criminal offense. It helps criminals commit more crime, it undermines the image of the South African Police Service, and it makes them more vulnerable to attacks from criminals, because then the public don't want to help them because they see them as corrupt. So there's simply no excuse for corruption.
All right, we seem to have lost our connection there to Gareth Newham. We were on a bit of a shaky connection to begin with anyway, but I'm glad we got to the end of that interview. And that's an important point that he makes there. Corruption is a crime, and the reason why it is so important when it comes to police officers themselves committing this crime of corruption is that it opens us up as a country to further crimes. Also, trust in our police service continuing to dwindle there. Gareth Newham via our Skype line. He's from the Institute for Security Studies.